In today's episode, cheating student thought he had me fooled. Fell right into my trap. Accuse me of stealing? You will lose everything. I did to my neighbor what they did to others. So let's get started. Cheating student thought he had me fooled. Fell right into my trap. So, I am a cancer researcher and a guest professor at an university's School of Medicine, teaching my specialty, imaging. Besides the usual acquisitions of medical images using MRI, CT, etc. Imaging has a lot to do with image processing. Some days I am just a glorified programmer/IT guy. And as anyone who has ever programmed anything will tell you, coding is a very personal activity. With enough experience, you can tell who wrote what just by looking at the lines. I am also in my late 20s and I am not native to this country, and it's my first year as guest professor. So, some students look at me as this inexperienced, gullible, foreign guy. As part of my module's grading, the students have to submit 2 reports that weight 10% each of their final grade. These reports are about image processing, and they have to code a fair bit. As usual, there are students that make an effort, some do minimal work, and then some cheat/copy. As I was grading the reports, I noticed a small group of students who found reports from previous years online and literally copy plus paste those reports, changing only their name. It was a facepalm moment, because those reports were not even good, and had a lot of errors. You see, in order to establish a baseline for my grading, I browsed previous year's reports, so I knew what to expect from the students of this module. Naturally, I graded them all with 0, and kept working my way through grading the reports I had left. Meanwhile, the students casually asked me in the halls how were the reports. Of course I can't comment on that until I release the grades. One time, this dude, who has copied from another report, 98% match on plagiarism checker, asks me when will I release the grades and comes with this story that he worked really hard on his reports. That his exam hasn't gone so well and he is hoping that the grade on his reports are enough to get a pass. I mean, submitting another person's work as your own is very wrong, but it was an online submission and impersonal. Right now, he was just lying through his teeth and to my face. I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't lost my composure and decide to come up with a plan. I knew that my exam was the last exam of the semester, and that after that the students usually go home or family vacations while they wait for their grades to be posted online. So I graded the exams and input their grades into my Excel with their report grades. For students had 0 due to cheating on their reports, and if I graded their reports with 50% of the max grade they would barely fail the module. But they would fail nonetheless. So, it was on. In order to be fair, I bumped everyone else's grades. A bunch of people with miserable reports ended up barely passing because of my grade bump. But, even though their reports were bad, it was their own work and not copied from anywhere. You see, students are entitled to make an appointment to review their grades after publishing, and before the grades are locked for the year. Basically, they sit with me, we go through their exam and reports, and their goal is to convince me to give them extra points in hope that they pass the module. I knew the cheaters would come, after all, they think they fooled me once already, and they still have half the report's points to bargain for. So I just waited for their emails. Lo and behold, they write me the same day the grades go online, saying how hard they have worked on their reports, and that they don't understand how they only got 50%. And that they wanted an appointment. I was ecstatic. Sure, let's review your grades. Do you remember that my exam was the last one? Well, they were already on vacations. Some very far away. And begged me for an online appointment. No can do. University policy. Moreover, you have 3 days to show for your appointment, otherwise the grades are locked, also university policy. So here they come, cutting their vacations short and catching planes. Some spent hours in buses and trains to make it on time. I know what many of you are thinking. They come, I show them the plagiarism checker results and reveal that I know that is not their work and send them on their way. Well, I considered it, but I had something better in mind. Those appointments usually take 10 minutes. I show them their work with my notes on what's wrong/right, and they try to find some inconsistencies in my grading and bargain for more points. I ain't giving you the opportunity. Mwahaha. So, one by one they sit with me individually. And I go through their exam and reports. Remember that they copied the reports? And copied bad ones, with a lot of errors. I ask questions, lots of them. Why did you do this? What is your reasoning for this? They don't know. It's know their work. They mumble random stuff, because they don't know what to answer. Point by point, mistake by mistake, I explain why it was wrong, how it should be done, lecturing the same material that they had already been lectured on during class. I make it long, I make it boring. I make it painful. I spent hours with each one of them throughout those 3 days. They always came with the same, I worked so hard on this. And a little smirk on their face because they thought that it should be really easy to fool me, the gullible foreign again. As the hours go by and I am walking through the errors one by one, I could see their expression change. Little by little, their hopes of passing being slowly crushed. And when they realized that I knew they cheated, and I wasn't going to give up any extra points. At this point they tried to cut short their appointment and leave. I wouldn't let them. We need to finish the review of your grades, it's university policy. And I just kept going, extending their misery for one more hour or two. It was legal torture, plain and simple. It was glorious. At the end, every single one of them left with a crushed soul look in their eyes and a fail in my class. They knew that I caught them, that I baited them, and they fell for it. They ruined their vacation and their family vacations, spent money to travel back and forth, wasted precious summer time, got bored to death, and have nothing to show for it. And next year they will have to repeat the module, with me. I hope you enjoy your summer. See you next year. Accuse me of stealing? You will lose everything. First post, be kind. This happened way back in the dark ages, 1986. I was 21 at the time and working for a gas station that was associated with a certain grocery store chain in Washington state. It was owned by a company not affiliated with said chain, but had locations at nearly every one. As this was long before the days of debit cards, this was a cash-only gas station. We didn't even take credit cards. Customers would pull up, pump their gas, and then come to my window to pay. We also sold cigarettes. No drinks, no snacks, customers couldn't even get into my booth. I had been working there about a year when the company announced it was closing the location. My manager and I were offered positions at another location upstate, and we both accepted. We moved our respective families and started our new jobs. As new hires, ugh. This station was incredible busy. We did more business in 8 hours than my old location would do in a week. This location also had a different setup. Here you would pull into the station from a single entrance, pump your gas, and then drive forward to a single exit where the pay here booth was located. There were always 2 cashiers on duty. Each cashier had a cash drawer. One thing I should note, there were also no computers. So closing the drawer down between shifts was timing consuming and tedious. We had to manually count the cigarettes remaining and count the cash drawers. We would fill out an end of shift report listing the starting balances and the ending balances. We also had to list the gallons sold from each pump. At the end of the shift, the total of gallons sold and the total cigarettes sold should equal the cash balance. It is important to note here that not once in the year I had worked for the previous location had I been off by more than 10 cents. The following morning after my first shift, I was informed by the manager that I was short $50. Impossible, I said, I balanced out yesterday. He said that I must have stolen that money after I had completed the paperwork. I just looked at him and said, no, I didn't. He gave me a verbal warning and said if it happened again, I would be fired and the stolen money would be deducted from my paycheck this week. In the 5 days that followed, I realized quickly the manager was up to something. My old manager, who was just another worker now, was also accused of stealing. As was one other new employee. I can't vouch for the other employee, but I'm pretty sure she did nothing wrong. The employees that had been there a while were never accused of anything. I did some checking and found out this manager was relatively new, had only been there about 6 months, and the other cashiers had been here before him. Only new cashiers were being accused of stealing. And that location had been having stealing problems for about 6 months, and the turnover was high with the new employees. I came to work at 6 a.m. on a Monday only to be told I was being fired. For cause. The manager accused me of taking $500 out of my drawer the previous Friday. He said he only discovered it this morning, even though he had worked sat and sun. I said okay and left. I was pretty angry, and instead of going home, I parked in the grocery store parking lot and proceeded to settle in to watch the gas station. I knew that at 9 a.m. sharp, he would take the cash in the safe and make the weekend deposit. At 9 a.m. he left the gas station and headed to the bank. But instead of walking into the bank, he walked into the Indian casino next door. It's not really a casino like we think of today, but more of a betting parlor for the races. It did have slot machines, but no card tables. I think, well, this is interesting. He comes out of the casino at exactly 10 a.m., walks next door to the bank, does his business, and then heads back to the gas station. I head home with a plan. Every morning I follow him from the gas station to the casino. I take a picture of him leaving, and one of him arriving at the bank and walking into the casino. I take pictures of him coming out and then heading to the bank. I do this for 5 days straight. He even went on Saturday. On day 3 my old manager was fired for stealing $150. I get the film developed, no digital camera in the dark ages, note the times and dates on the back of each one. Then I call the main office of the gas company. It's after 5, but I'm hoping someone is there. And there is. I speak to a woman and explain my situation, and she says she knows exactly who I should speak to and transfers me. By some grace of God, she has transferred me to none other than the president-CEO of the company. I tell him my story and tell him I did not steal from his company and could prove who actually did. He took down my information and said he would be in touch. I'm thinking to myself, yeah right. The next morning I went to the station to perform my usual observation of the manager. At 9 a.m. he leaves for the bank. At 10 a.m. he comes out. At that moment 2 stern-looking gentlemen approach him. One pulls out his wallet and shows him something. The other one is talking. The manager goes pale and takes a step back. Next thing I know he is being escorted to a car I hadn't noticed, and they drive off. I lose them at a traffic signal, so I head back to the station. They all show back up about 5 minutes later, and a few minutes after that a police cruiser pulls in. The officer talks to the stern gentleman and proceeds to place the manager in handcuffs. The other man says nothing but is glaring daggers at the manager. The president called me later that afternoon and informed me that the manager had been arrested for embezzlement. Turns out that in 6 months he had managed to steal about $5,000. He would take the store cash into the casino and gamble with it. If he won, he would make the normal bank deposit. If he lost, he would make the deposit and note in his records that we had been short the previous day. The CEO had already been focusing on that location because of the stealing and high turnover rate, but my information helped them figure out what exactly had been going on. I was thanked and sent a substantial check as a reward. My old manager was offered the manager's job, and I was offered my old job back. I declined as I had already found another job that I liked more and paid better. The gambling manager was sentenced to 1 year in jail and ordered to attend counseling for his gambling addiction. His wife divorced him and took their 3 children to California. His house was foreclosed on, and he ended up in a homeless shelter. I did to my neighbor what they did to others. To start, I bought a house with the intention of doing a flip. When I moved in, the self-appointed block captain let me know who they were the first day. Sadly, they were my next-door neighbors. I tried to be friendly, but listening to them I realized how horrible they were and tried to still be civil. My significant other kept saying just wait for it to be our turn. They bragged about, though, their contacts with the city, forcing people to make improvements on their houses, getting undesirable renters out of the houses, and just harassing people in general. As I worked on flipping my house, the wife became a worse thorn in my side. To start, she demanded I put up a fence so people would quit cutting through my yard and scaring her. Then, her and the husband demanded I take care of the weeds in the yard or they will do it and bill me. After that, a storm, a tree scraped their shingles, and they asked for $1,200 to replace them. The tree was there before I moved in, and by code they are responsible to cut back the branches to the property line. When I wouldn't pay, they had a relative jump my fence and cut the trees down. Needless to say, I began to ignore to them, so she became a constant gnat and moved on to another target. Then one day, as I was tearing down my deck for a patio, I realized she put a feral cat colony on a section of my property. I had wondered why all the stray cats were around, and I finally found out. I reached out to the city and demanded it be removed, but they said she followed the law on getting it in place. As I tried to get it shut down, she began unhinged behavior, from standing in her window staring at me, yelling out the window at me, to hitting the fence with items to scare my dog. Here my revenge started. I started by filing a HRO/harassment restraining order against the wife and had it granted ex parte with the evidence I provided, or course she contested, as it was defamatory to her character. Before the hearing, the husband tried to physically intimidate me. So I filed one against him, and it was also granted ex parte. In the hearing it came up that there was an HRO against the husband as well. They dogged being served until I had it published as a means of service. I started to make complaints about them and their house. Also, I made police calls when necessary. As I did this, the other neighbors began to realize they could do to them what they had done to them and others. For example, as I was having my front door replaced, needing a building work permit. I knew they were doing internal remodeling, so I called a city inspector, and they were fined for not having permit. As she ranted at the inspector, he looked at my window and saw I had mine displayed. Their back porch became horrid, so I made another call to a city inspector, and they had to clear it out. Then they had a broken window on the porch door, so I called an inspector, and they had to replace the door. Next, the paint on their house was peeling, so I called an inspector, and they had to repaint. The inspector also found the wood underneath was rotted, along with their front porch was sloping. So, they needed to fix the front porch, sections of wood, and repaint. Through all this, they had up cameras to prove they were not doing the things I said, i.e. hitting the fence. They also pointed a camera at my backyard. As it was legal to point a camera into my yard, and a part of my HRO was her intrusive watching behaviors, I gave the camera the middle finger on my way to and from my garage. When she complained, with the city tiring of her, their response was she was admitting to intrusively watching me. The fight over the cat colony came to an end when I realized one of the cats had a serious disease, and I began to capture them and turn them into animal control. Don't worry, animal control was part of the feral cat program, so they would not be put down, but the neighbor would have to pay a fine to get each cat out or have the colony closed. Finally, I caught the sick one, and it had rabies. Part of the program was for her to capture each new cat, have it vaccinated. Something she admitted to willing not doing on her GoFundMe for the colony. I soon had the GoFundMe shut down when I provided the evidence she was not using the funds as she stated they were going to be used. The city now had to act to close the colony. The person at Animal Control who wouldn't respond to my complaints was fired. The neighbors called in a city mediator who we met with, presented all the evidence, and said we would not meet with them, and provided extremely racist tweets they made about neighbors. The city cut ties with them as community leaders. With their power to bully gone, and having spent what I can only imagine in fines and repairs, like they did to numerous other neighbors. After 14 years they sold their house and moved out, way out to the suburbs where they only have one neighbor about 50 yards away. They knew I was wrapping up my flip and would be out in less than a year. Without being able to bully their neighbors, with people having their back, they seemed to have no further reason to stay. Needless to say, I did several more things to wear them down. Finally, when I listed my house, it was sold while theirs was still on the market. As a final FU to them, I reported to the county they had both the new and old house listed as their homestead, meaning they were paying less in property taxes, so they got hit in with more fines on my way out. Thanks for watching.